Yes, certainly, Wendy. Thank you.
You're live, Chair.
Right, thank you, Wendy. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm County Councillor Ruth Edwards. I chair the Planning Committee. So welcome to all the general public, officers and members. This is the 1st of March, obviously St David's Day, so welcome all those who've either got leeks or daffodils, and thank you all for your many contributions to the committee. And also we must really take on board the concerns of all the people that are struggling with the war today, and they are in our thoughts, and it really is atrocious, and we have to be very thankful of to where we live in Monmouthshire. Well, as you know, we're still doing a lot of remote meetings, so I shall lead at what I have to at the start of every meeting. So welcome everyone to this meeting. It is fully remote, and the meeting is being held in accordance with the emergency legislation that enables the council to hold this meeting remotely, alongside the council constitution, and ensures that the council can continue to operate and make democratic decisions in an open and transparent way. I would like to remind members that this meeting is still being streamed live to the public, and can I request that you switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you are not speaking directly to the committee to ensure there is no unnecessary background noise. All sections of the Members' Code of Conduct will apply to members in this virtual meeting environment and are as applicable now as they are in a traditional meeting setting. Can I also remind members of the meeting to ensure that their chat functionality is switched on, and should they wish to speak on a particular item, to make their request clear in that area, and I will invite you to speak at the relevant point of the meeting, where you would then unmute your microphone and switch your camera back on. Decisions of this remote committee will hold the same weight as a decision of a normal planning committee meeting, provided that the meeting remains quorate and meets its legislative requirements to make a decision, regardless of whether a member of this committee meeting is unable to cast their vote due to the technical issues that we very often get. The decision of the committee will remain valid. So thank you all very much for your attendance, and could I ask for apologies for absence, please?
Chair, no apologies have been received.
Right, thank you very much, Richard. Declarations of interest, please.
Chair, I need to not declare an interest as such, but I need to make clear that I sit on both the Planning Committee and the and Cabinet, and I've sought advice from the Monitoring Officer regarding the Abergavenny Velo Park, and are satisfied that I'm okay to proceed on both, and commit to approach. I commit to approaching each decision on the basis of the information presented, without being predetermined in any way. So I just needed to make that clear. I shall be taking part in both meetings on the advice of the Monitoring Officer.
I took it that you would have had advice as to how to proceed anyway, Councillor Murphy. Thank you very much for that clarity. Right. So thank you. No other declarations of interest. So I would ask for someone to move, unless there is any relevant conditions that are relevant to the accuracy of the minutes of the last meeting. Has anybody, sorry, a bit of frog in my throat. Has anybody got any issues they wish to raise about the accuracy of the last meeting? Could I ask someone to move, please?
Happy to move, Chair.
I'll second it.
Thank you. That was Murphy. No. Thank you very much. So now we can go on now to the first application of the afternoon. I'm not sure who's first of all doing this one. Is it you? Right. Thank you, Phil. Could you also please make sure that you introduce yourself so those looking in will know who's who?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My name is Philip Thomas. I'm Development Services Manager with Monmouthshire County Council. I'm presenting the first item for a construction of a 1 kilometre closed road cycle track, vehicular access and parking at land adjoining Racecourse Farm and Llanfoist Waste Transfer Station site near Abergavenny.
I didn't quote the application number, Phil, and that is 2020/0000 400. Thank you, Phil.
Indeed. I'll just share the presentation with you now. There we are. Okay, so the proposed site, which you'll see edge red there in the slide, is at Racecourse Farm, and it's 1.5 miles south of Abergavenny town centre. It's positioned adjacent to a mixed use area close to a junction of the heads of the Valley Road, and the area near the road junction has been developed to accommodate new housing, a residential care home and a roadside leisure development, including McDonald's and Costa Coffee. Llanfoes Primary School is positioned at the western boundary, which you can see in that, where my cursor is there, of the site. And other important features include the River Usk to the east and Monmouthshire Golf Course to the south. The whole site is 6.4 hectares in size and is currently used for grazing. The floodplain of the River Usk covers the low-lying areas to the east, and it's categorised as flood zone C2, an area of floodplain without significant flood defence infrastructure, where only less vulnerable development should be considered. The land to the west of the site is at a higher level. The area is undulating, as we saw yesterday, those who were there, with some steeply sloping banks. There are also several utility features, including the footings and towers for the overhead power lines, a high pressure gas main, which below ground but crosses part of the site, and a gravity-fed sewer pipe, and the former household waste landfill site adjoins this particular site as well. So that's turned round the other way, if you like, rotated so that the north is over on the left-hand side. So the design of the proposed site reflects the suitability of the terrain for a mix of different cycling facilities or disciplines built around a core closed road circuit, or CRC, together with cyclocross and introduction level mountain biking facilities. The built development includes a 6-metre tarmac circuit that is just over 1 kilometre long, with 41 metres of ascent per lap. The main circuit is 0.9 kilometres long, with 35 metres of ascent. So that includes the western loop, with street lighting that allows winter and evening activity to take place. So that would include this area here. A 250-metre start and finish, start and finish straight, suitable for regional and national events, with a finish line shelter for timekeepers and officials. And there'd also be a series of recreational trails located within and alongside the main circuit that encourages recreational cycling, as well as cyclocross and entry-level mountain biking. The car park would be in this area for 80 cars, and access would be on the approach road to the waste transfer station here. And that's McDonald's there and the care home here. Part of the Abergavenny Leisure Centre and Comprehensive School site has been used by a local cycling club as its base for coaching, training and events for over 10 years. However, this area is likely to be redeveloped as part of the school's modernisation and therefore lost as a cycling facility. There is an established need for a replacement and purpose-built cycling facility for the local cycling network, especially given the popularity and importance of the town as a cycling hub. The visual impact of the development will be reduced by the proposed planting, which I'll come on to. I'll leave it on that one for the moment. By the proposed planting and by the detailed layout of elements such as lighting, including omission of lighting for the western area, again that area up there nearest the newish housing in this estate here, and screen planting in response to local landscape character. So there'll also be some additional planting alongside the care home here. There'll also be obviously planting all throughout the development and green infrastructure provision. For those effects that remain, it is considered that they are balanced by the positive change that will be introduced as a result of the development. The siting of the car park and storage area adjacent to the One Planet Centre, so in this area here, will help to minimise the visual impact of parked cars, and 3 storage containers that are proposed in that area. Overall, it's considered that the proposed development will not harm the visual amenity of the area and meets the requirements of policy DES1 of the LDP. The proposals include the diversion of 2 public footpaths that cross the site and additional new connecting routes. Increased accessibility is also supported through the installation of pedestrian gates, well-constructed paths and gentle gradients where possible. The experience of visiting the area will therefore be enhanced through substantial improvements to the integrity of the landscape and provision for informal recreation, including seating, a pond viewing platform and interpretation features boosting the green infrastructure offer. The landscape planting plans provide a comprehensive planting and planting scheme and mitigation as requested, with habitat enhancements and diversity as well as effective habitat connectivity. The planting specifications in terms of species, size, density and numbers are acceptable from a landscape and GI perspective. And so that's, yeah, looking through in terms of the needs and opportunities, GI needs and opportunities. And then we've got some sections through the site to actually show how the landform will sit in terms of provision of the tracks. So that's looking through the most northerly part of the site, that's furthest away from any built development. That's the mid part of the track, the circuit. That's the topmost part of the track. And that's again a picture through the central part of it. And we'll come back to the photos in a moment. So in relation to biodiversity issues, a Great Crested Newt survey submitted with the application concluded that based on the evidence that it's likely there'd be a moderate population present. In accordance with the recommendations of this survey, a scheme has been designed which ensures that suitable high quality features will be included that will be managed and monitored adequately by the council itself. Amphibian underpasses will be installed under the track, hibernation and safe haven opportunities will be provided inside the track, and the remaining grassland quality maintained and improved. Bat activity was noted as occurring principally along the dark fringes of the site, which are made up of hedgerows and tree lines and are planned for retention. The lighting scheme includes 2 separate elements, the lighting of the car park and street lighting that allows a reduced area of the circuit, the sort of middle section really, to be used during the evening. The lighting has been designed to minimise light spillage while allowing safety for the track users, and we are satisfied that the measures proposed would not harm ecological interests. The business plan for the Velo Park estimates between 10 to 20,000 visitors per annum. The final level of use will be known once the programme is fully developed, following a number of test events to establish the capacity of the circuit for racing and the ability of the venue to manage a range of different activities. It's proposed that the Velo Park will be operational each day from 8 in the morning till 9:30 in the evening. Busier times at the Velo Park are likely to be Monday to Friday from 5 PM till 9 PM, with weekends the busiest at 9 in the morning till 5 PM, and also bank holidays similarly. The use of the facility will not require a tannoy speaker or announcement system that might affect residents. Traffic movements within the site will be restricted to the northern car parking area located furthest away from the residential areas and closest to the main roads and waste recycling centre. In contrast to traditional team sports, cycling generates little sound or necessitates shouting or other loud noises while cycling. The main site, the coaching areas, will be located to the east of the circuit. Going back. So to the east of the circuit, so that's in these sort of areas here. And that's furthest away from the actual housing areas. So the sorry, I lost my place here. To limit the risk of noise impacting neighbours, the use of the Velo Park will not take place during less social hours. That is after 21:30, that's 9:30 PM, and will not include the western area of the track, that topmost part there, of the track nearer to residential areas after dark. Lighting will be fitted with cut-off louvers, directing light onto the track only, which will prevent light spill outside the site. Lighting has been omitted from the western field, as I pointed that area again, which is adjacent to those houses here. and the lighting will be user controlled, so they are only in use or dimmable when required. Screen plantings proposed along the boundary with the Fox Centre care home, which will filter views of the site in this area. Filter views of the site, and it will also help in actually screening the very utilitarian waste transfer station. But it will allow longer views across it to the Little Skirrid and beyond. The transport statement submitted in support concludes that the development will not result in a severe impact upon the safety or operation of the surrounding local highway network. The view is shared by highway colleagues, and as such there are no significant highway or transportation matters that would justify the refusal of this planning application on that basis. The proposal includes 80 parking spaces, which is in accordance with the assessment of similar facilities and accommodates the entire demand associated with training and coaching activity, as well as most larger scale events. There's a field to the south, if I can perhaps show you on one of the other plans. So there's a field. This is again is to the east, really southeast, that is owned by the council. Adjacent to the waste transfer centre, that could be served as the primary ad hoc overflow car parking area in this area for up to 320 cars. So there would be a need to reference the need for that facility, as well as potential use of the school, and link via a public footpath into the site for weekend use, and thus there is a need to actually have an additional condition for an event management plan that we would suggest is applied on top of the current conditions there. So there is an event management plan which has been put in the transport statements. We'd reference that, but that would need to be updated, and the condition would reflect that once trial or pilot events have taken place, to ensure that the site is informed by those pilots, and the final event management plan is then refined to reflect the best possible management measures to accommodate larger events at the site. So there is a need for that additional condition. The vast majority of the Velo Park would be expected to remain dry in all but the most extreme weather conditions. The proposed development would be operated with minimal risk from flooding, would not increase flood risk elsewhere, and is therefore considered to be compliant with TAN 15. Given the scale of hard surfaces, including the track and associated car park, the scheme will need SAB approval to acceptably manage surface water drainage. In respect of foul drainage and the potential for phosphate pollution to the River Usk, no cafe or toilet facilities are proposed as part of the development at this time. In the future, the existing One Planet Centre has potential to be used, or a suitable modular building could be added at a later date for this purpose, once phosphate stripping technology is added to the local waste treatment works. At current time, however, a small number of portaloos will be provided in the parking area for daily use. Large-scale events will provide additional portaloo facilities in accordance with event management plans. It is proposed to remove the waste off-site to be treated at a waste treatment works in a non-phosphorus sensitive area, in accordance with the foul drainage statement that has been submitted in support of the proposal. Compliance with the detailed strategy can be conditioned should members be minded to recommend approval. Council Ecology colleagues have set out that a full appropriate assessment will be undertaken with regards to the above identified foul drainage issue. Any application should only be approved subject to the appropriate assessment concluding that features of the River Usk SAC, Special Area of Conservation, will not be adversely affected by the development. The appropriate assessment has been sent by our colleagues in Ecology to NRW for approval. Should members be minded to approve the application today, it will be subject to the appropriate assessment being agreed by NRW, and members are invited to resolve to approve the scheme subject to this issue being agreed. So in conclusion, we'd recommend approval subject to conditions, including the revised conditions in late correspondence, the additional events management plan condition, and the resolution of the appropriate assessment regarding the foul drainage phosphate issue with NRW. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. Very detailed report, and I'm sure most members have digested it all before they come to the committee. I call upon, I believe somebody wishes to speak from Llanfoist also, but I believe the local member is Councillor Howard. Do you wish to comment first, please? You have 6 minutes where you can speak, and 2 minutes later on if you wish to sum up. Okay. Councillor Howard?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Sorry, it took a minute to press the buttons.
Yeah,
well, I realise that this is quite a long-held dream for officers, clubs and cyclists in the Abergavenny area, and I recall having been the ward member for Gilwen in the past of the attempts, unsuccessfully, for other reasons, to try and get something similar off the ground there, and Mike and Ian put a lot of work in. So, you know, that's not lost on me, but I also have to reflect the views of residents. So I've got a combination of a few comments and questions. And I think that the first one is around the PAC report, and there's quite a number of people spend a lot of time preparing responses, raising their concerns, and I think there may be a sense amongst them that seeing the application come in then that maybe they weren't reflected, and perhaps that they were treated in a bit of an anodyne way. It was a bit of a tick box exercise. Having said that, we are where we are. So I think the main issue or problem with the site revolves around traffic. I mean, firstly, there's the parking on site, and I appreciate that's allocated within the area next to the landfill site would deal with most of the daily use with clubs and individuals, but it's the potential for the larger events is the greater concern. And I note in the traffic assessment or statement, and I can't remember if it was in the draft event management plan as well, there was a suggestion that the school site could be used for parking. That worries me because of the potential then for people who get to the school, find it's full, and then they'll park within the residential estate that already experiences a lot of school traffic. The field that Phil referred to that isn't in the red line boundary was suggested it could take around 300 parking spaces. Now, that isn't proposed to be conditioned, and I get from reading the event management plan and again the TS that there needs to be an element of suck it and see to see if that overspill parking works. But the big concern is that field was identified as being a potential replacement for the Llanfoist allotments, which, as you may recall, Chair, the current site at some point in the future may have to be reduced or moved because of the expansion of the cemetery. So that field can't be all things to all men, so to speak. The second traffic issue then is the access to the site, and I don't remember site visit yesterday. I would imagine at the time they visited, it probably would have been a little bit quieter, I hope, but I know around there it can be absolutely nuts, and I got caught in this traffic coming off the 465 slip. You've got people trying to drive into the development to access the homes in Forth Llanfoist that you visited yesterday. One of the residents there told me that you'd been and spoken to him, but you've also got people then that's stuck in a queue to go to the tip. You've got the residents, you've got people who are queuing to go into Costa Coffee, you've got people who are queuing to go into McDonald's, and it can be bedlam at that roundabout. And I've seen it, and I've sat there queuing and I've taken pictures. Residents have sent me pictures of the same. So I'm really worried that having the extra traffic then going to the site is going to make it unacceptable, particularly since, and I didn't hear Phil reference this, and I know it's something that the Community Council picked up, is that transport statement and the surveys that supported it. Those surveys were done on a Sunday in the middle of a national lockdown, so it's hardly surprising that not many vehicle movements were going to be recorded, and I'm really worried about the soundness of relying on a TS and traffic surveys that were done at a completely atypical time, and I wish that a further survey had been done, and I think particularly as it's a council's application that we really ought to have done that. but obviously it's a matter for the council as applicant and not the planning authority. The third point about the foul water, Phil touched on, and the suggestion that the waste from Portaloos could be taken off site to treatment works that do have phosphate stripping technology. I hear mention of a condition, but how is that going to be controlled and enforced? Because I would imagine that those Portaloos are going to be provided by contractors. Well, is somebody going to follow the contractors to see where they dispose of the waste? And I know that's quite a small element in the scheme of things, but when we're talking within Land Force and the surrounding area about potentially not allowing proposals for single dwellings because of that the phosphates problem, then you know that although it's small scale, it is relevant. The next point then, neighbour amenity, and appreciate there have been a lot of letters in support, and I've seen a petition as well. Obviously, a lot of those who support it aren't living immediately next to the site, so no, I don't necessarily allocate an awful lot of weight to that. But Phil mentioned that there wouldn't be any sound amplification, but what about spectators, provision for them, and the large events that would take place? I've been to previous cycling events in Abergavenny Town, which are absolutely brilliant, but you know, there's a lot of activity going on, and to think there might be some sort of national level event without any kind of spectator involvement, or the sound or the general excitement you get at those sort of things doesn't seem to ring true to me. And I think the last point, you'll be glad it is the last one, is out of hours security, because there are footpaths crossing the site, and obviously they can't be closed. What are we going to do about out of hours and the potential then for people using the track who oughtn't to be using the track, so motorbikes, etc. You know, I could see the message from Denzel that I've probably exceeded my time, so I think I'd like to pose those questions to Phil. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howard. Do you wish to answer some of those before anybody else comments, Phil, or is there anybody speaking from the Community Council or not? I do not have a name for them, although they do object.
Excuse me. No, we haven't got anybody from the Community Council on this particular.
That's quite right. As I had no name, I just took it as they were just they'd lodged an objection. So could you please answer some of those concerns for Councillor Howard, please? I'm
not sure I can answer all of them, because as I say, I think they're probably some of those are matters for the applicant, and
yeah,
they have been. The highway issues obviously have been addressed in the report as best we can, I guess, but we have got Mark with us, Mark Davis, so he may be able to help as well in some of the issues. In terms of the parking and the overspill, pardon me, we're looking to actually condition the events management plan. I wasn't entirely aware that the area had been earmarked for allotment expansion, but if it's needed for this purpose and its permission is granted on that basis, then I think we need to look at what's before us really, than where the allotments might go or might not go. So I think if we're granting this subject to the events management plan, and that is contingent on that area over near the waste transfer station being used for overspill, then that's what we need to actually condition and take into account as part of this particular planning application. It is landowner controlled by the applicant, so it is enforceable in terms of us seeking that to be used in overspill. I think in terms of foul water, that would be, yes, it would be a matter for the council to enforce and monitor. I think we would probably, as part of the detailed foul drainage plan, seek some sort of plan from any appointed contractor that they can verify where they are actually going to move the waste, so that we can have confidence it's going outside the phosphate area. And we would rely on that. I would say it's probably going to be hopefully a short-term solution in any case, because we are looking for in the medium to longer term phosphate stripping facilities going into Llanfoist water treatment works, which will obviously resolve a lot of the issues for development in the Abergavenny area in terms of phosphate pollution. So I think that'd be a it's a short-term solution, which I hope we can manage in conjunction with understanding contractors' own management plans for that site. In terms of noise, my understanding is that there won't be the sort of events that you see in the middle of Abergavenny at the site. Those are sort of major, even televised events that would go on with national household cycling names like Mark Cavendish. I don't think those are the sort of events that are going to be held here. It's going to be more your sort of practice, and there will be competitions, but it's on a much smaller scale. It's not going to have that sort of spectator facility element alongside it because of how it's going to be developed. There won't be the facilities for standing and seating and viewing that would be available in the middle of the town centre when the cyclists come through there, which is a different form of event, and that's what I've been advised by Mike in Monlife, Mike Moran. In terms of out-of-hours security, then I'm sure there are ways and means of controlling access for motorcyclists to come into there via, barriers that will allow walkers to come in there, but not motorcyclists, and that's something that we can certainly discuss with the applicant to ensure that doesn't happen in the future. So I think I've tried to answer some of those points as best I can. I don't know whether any other colleagues can contribute. Thank you.
Could Mike Moran, if he's on board, could he comment on the overspill, please? I did see a caption at the top. He put a comment, but it was so quick I couldn't read it. Are you there, Mike?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, we have looked at the overspill car park area as a potential allotment site, but that has been discounted because the field is a floodplain, so it does flood at certain times of the year. So it wouldn't be suitable for allotments, and we're looking at other options for that sort of provision in Abergavenny. Obviously, any events that were held down there would only be held at the times of year when there isn't flooding on that field, if you see what I mean. And yes, it was used as a car park for the Eisteddfod, as members will know, in 2016. So I don't think that's an issue that sort of concerns us greatly, really. And I think just to emphasise the point that we're not looking at a lot of large events on the site. We think that probably no more than 6 a year will be held on the site, but I wouldn't want to tie us down to a certain number because we have to try it and see to see what the circuit will actually accommodate. Yeah,
thank you for that clarity, Mike, because I know there was concerns over has it been an overspill, and we don't know, perhaps they're sort of preempting the need of something, so we have got that issue there. So there is any other comments now? The objector has been, well, no, it had registered. We've had the local member, and there is no right of reply if nobody is registered to object. So could I take comments now, please, from the committee? Anybody else wish to comment? I can't see any hands up actually in the chat.
Yes, please, Chair. Matt Feakins.
Oh, right, Councillor Feakins, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And in general terms, I'm very much in favour of this application. I think it's making great use of an otherwise derelict bit of land. Notwithstanding, obviously, the concerns, which are probably operational concerns more than planning concerns, or they need to be conditioned or controlled by those conditions. But just one question for Phil, really. It's just in relation to the overspill car park. Can we condition land outside of the red line boundary? So I am concerned, a little bit concerned, that people are a little bit conscious that it is a county council application going forward, and I wouldn't want people to think that we're doing things for ourselves that other members, that another applicant couldn't do as such. So the question really is, can we condition land outside the red line boundary in relation to the overspill car park, or should that come back as a separate application for the overspill car park? Thanks, Chair. Thank you,
Councillor Feakin.
Well, it's not going to be engineered at all, isn't it? It's just going to be literally used to park on. We could get included in a blue edge, which is land otherwise owned or controlled by the applicant, if that provides more certainty. Normally you'd have a gramping condition, which would say no work shall commence on site until such time has happened. I think maybe it'd be safe to get it included as part of the application in Edge Blue, perhaps, if we're going to refer to it as part of the events management plan. Craig, I don't know whether you've got any comments to add on that.
Yeah, happy to come in there, Phil. The overflow car park has been outlined in Appendix I of the transport statement, so that is what we're proposing to condition, the fact that that comes forward. If there are any issues with regards to localities of that being in the red line or being in the blue line, maybe that is something that we could consult with legal colleagues on prior to issuing a decision. As Phil outlined at the beginning, members today are considered recommending approval subject to the Natural Resources Wales being acceptable for the mitigation measure for phosphates. So in the interim time, we can certainly conclude this matter as well if members are minded to approve, subject to that, to ensure that that can be conducted.
Right. Thank you, Craig.
In that case, I'm happy to move, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Feachin. I do not have a hand facility, so I cannot see anyone else who wishes to speak. So if anybody does want...
Chair, I'd like to come in. I haven't got a raised hand function.
No, I haven't either. I don't know why. So I'm very sorry for those who are waiting to speak and I can't see you in turn. I do see that Councillor Brown wishes to speak and also Councillor Harris. So I'll take Councillor Brown first, please.
Thank you, Chair. There is actually a chat facility in there is a raise hand function if you scroll if you scroll on the chat bar to see, because after me, I think Councillor Harris has put his hand up. I think obviously a cycling facility is a good use of the land there. One of the things I did want to say was that we were told that it was subject to approval by NRW, but I wondered whether or not it also should be subject to approval by the Water Board. I appreciate that the porta cabins would be hired and then it would be up to the companies how they disposed of it, but I think I would like to ensure that it did go to a phosphate stripping facility so that it didn't actually result in a further potential pollution elsewhere, because although the recommendation is a non-phosphate area, I think the issue is that in all the areas the sewage capacity isn't particularly great, and we don't know whether the infrastructure is there to deal with extra sewage in any particular area. So I think we ought to consider what the Water Board response on this particular issue is as well, because I think obviously there is in terms of phosphates that you can't pollute the River Usk, but I mean if you end up polluting the River Severn, then that goes into the sea and pollutes the sea. So it's not as if sewage does need to be treated with phosphate stripping, and I think I'd like some reassurance that when these porta cabins are used, that they do go to Water Board areas where the sewage treatment plants have the capacity, and also that they have phosphate stripping capacity as well, rather than just leave it to a commercial enterprise to sort out where the waste goes, because obviously this has been an issue in this area in terms of building residences as well. So I think it's all a little bit iffy on that particular condition, and I think that needs to be sorted more clearly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Craig, I know, has been doing a lot of work on the phosphates. If you'd like to comment on the concerns of Councillor Brown, please, Craig.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Brown, for the concern. It is something that we have given due thought and consideration, and are working with Natural Resources Wales, the environmental regulators, to ensure that there are no pathways for this waste to enter into the watercourse. What we're proposing is a mitigation measure of a foul drainage management plan, which all contractors who take away the waste will have to adhere to, in the same way that any commercial enterprise would have to work with the management plan, which are conditions of planning consents. So that would be a condition and a requirement within their contractual agreements, and for them working on this site, which obviously the council would be partly helping to operate and manage. So I think in terms of consulting Welsh Water, they wouldn't usually comment on the detail. The local planning authority is the decision maker with regards to the impact of potential phosphate entering into the water course, and we work with Natural Resources Wales, who are the environmental regulators, to this regard. So if they consider the mitigation measure to be appropriate and acceptable, then as local planning authority, we'd have the right to make that decision. And by the use of that foul drainage management plan, there isn't a route to a pathway to the watercourse. So I think that would be sufficient really to inform this decision. And as Phil did allude to previously, this hopefully is a temporary measure, and when there is a permanent solution for phosphates for in Abergavenny and other areas in the north of Monmouthshire, we will be able to potentially remove this element and this condition and use phosphate stripping within Llanfoist.
Thank you very much, Craig. Very quickly then, Councillor Brown.
Could I just correct something that was said in the presentation? My understanding is that it's going to be used for cyclists as opposed to motorcyclists, because I think it's very important to clarify that, because obviously there'd be a lot more noise with motorcyclists than there would be with cyclists. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Right, I will now also take Councillor Roger Harris, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm surprised I'm coming in this soon. I thought other local members might have come in before me, but as we're aware of any large development, it causes problems at times for local residents. And obviously, occasionally it's going to be the case here if this goes ahead, because it's going to have, from the looks of it, national significance. But as far as I'm concerned, the positives outweigh the negatives. The amount of exercise that will be generated, the amount of facilities for young people to participate, and also for the residents, if you don't mind me saying so, of the nursing home, actually looking out and seeing all these youngsters enjoying themselves and remembering their youth. I'm sure it would be a positive enhancement for them rather than negative enhancement. So as far as I'm concerned, as I've mentioned, there are positives and negatives. The positives are outweighing, and if Councillor Feakins has proposed the development, I'm happy to second it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. I won't take that recommendation as of yet. If there's anybody else, I still cannot get a hand to show if anybody else wishes to speak. If anybody else wishes to speak before I call back, thank you, Councillor Jordan. You can now.
Could I speak after Paul, please, Madam Chairman? Thank you.
Is that Councillor Webb?
It is.
Yes, thank you. I'll take Councillor Jordan, Councillor Webb, and then also Councillor Woodhouse after that. It's so annoying if there's no hand signal in this screen today, because I just can't see unless somebody turns their camera on, and I'll give them leave then to speak. Thank you, Councillor Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In fact, if you go to the chat bar and scroll up, you'll find the chat box and the hand function on the right-hand side. But in any event, the point I was going to make, I'd reiterate the
can't see it still.
Well, I'd reiterate the comments made by Councillor Harris. I'd agree with those absolutely. However, part of the curtilage of Monmouthshire County Council incorporates the pond at this site, and I was wondering if it would be possible to incorporate the pond as part of the development so that there'd be a control of management of the pond. Perhaps officers would care to comment on that.
My understanding, it's owned by a third, or some of the pond is owned by, a large part of it's owned by a third party. So I think that would be subject to negotiation. But I think the important thing to think about in this, under the guise of this application, is we are getting some quite significant green infrastructure management measures in place by condition in the medium to long term. So we are actually getting large parts of this site and the area of pond that we have got access to be managed in a more responsible way than at present. It's not really being managed at all. It's and we're getting a positive mitigation in place to manage the new population and bats, so that there's no harm to ecology. I don't know whether Mike wants to come in there to help, because that's not really part of the planning application, so I don't think it's something we can insist on as part of this particular proposal.
Right. Thank you, Phil, for that explanation.
Yes.
Councillor Jordan, have you finished now?
I have indeed, Madam Chair. Thank you, Phil, for that response.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Anne Webb. Next, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I welcome this proposal, having a lot of cyclists, off-road cyclists, and all types of cyclists in my area, and I think it's a wonderful proposition, and I would recommend approval of this application. However, I'm just wondering how long the temporary toilets will be in place and when we are going to consider permanent. The temporary toilets aren't a very beautification part of the scheme, and I'm just wondering if there's any proposals long-term for proper toilets, please.
Yes, I'm sure that will be on. Right, Craig, you go ahead, because I mean you're very involved with the phosphates issue.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Webb. It will be until we have a solution for phosphates, this environmental constraint, which is having an impact on development proposals within the north of Monmouthshire at the moment. So there's no definitive date when that will be. All I can express is there are positive conversations being had with Natural Resources Wales, Geocymru Welsh Water, and we're looking at longer term solutions for this issue. I can't give any further clarification at this point in terms of dates or guarantees when that will be, but this solution that's been put forward enables members to consider this proposal now and for works to get underway with regards to construction, while that permanent solution for foul drainage is also being considered. And this temporary measure for Portaloos with the foul management plan in accordance with Natural Resources Wales is considered to be appropriate mitigation measure until that comes into play.
Thank you, Craig. At least they can start making a move. Right, thank you very much. I believe Councillor Woodhouse was next who wished to speak.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. My chat bar's frozen too, that's why I couldn't find the raised hand. Yes, as Councillor Howard said, this is a long-awaited development. We want to encourage cycling, and it's a very exciting project. However, we want it to work for everybody, and I know the people who visit. If the site is approved, I know the people who are going to visit there are going to be as concerned as the residents. They wouldn't want to cause any upset. They would want to come and use the facility and enjoy the area. I'm thinking about, I mean, it was mentioned at the site visit yesterday, and I've read through the report several times, the traffic and parking management for events. If I know this will be sort of closely monitored and studied, but then a lot of traffic go down there to the amenity site. I'm wondering now, is the times of operation of the cycling, the velo park, going to be? It's not always going to be at the same time as the amenity site is open, so there will be less traffic going down at certain times, is what I'm saying, to the amenity site. If there were a problem in the future, perhaps some sort of coordination could be thought through, because it is an MCC controlled, even though we don't operate it, it's MCC's amenity. So that's my one question about parking and actually the access, the concerns raised by residents. And my other question is about the lighting. It may well be already done, but I couldn't find it in the report, the use of solar panels for this sort of lighting. Is a very open space, and I would have thought that would be something that could be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Woodhouse. Phil, would you like to comment on some of those comments from Councillor Woodhouse? Especially staggering the times of the traffic. Obviously, it's busier sometimes than others.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we mentioned in the report when the busiest times would be. They won't always coincide with the operation of the waste cycling centre, but they will occasionally. So that all the more need for, especially for larger events, to have the management plan in place and dialogue. If the events are particularly large, then they do involve a safety advisory committee. It's not committee. What are they called, Mark? Sorry. They're a safety advisory group, aren't they?
It is the Event Safety Advisory Group.
That's right, yeah. So they would be involved, and that's one of the aspects they would look at in terms of avoiding conflict with other users in that particular area, or minimising impact on those areas. But those would tend to be events which are large, and I can't emphasise enough that a lot of the events that we run at this site, the vast majority, will not be anywhere near the sort of event range that would trigger this sort of concern. So yes, there will be occasions when the Velo Park will be open when it is the waste transfer station is also open. But for instance, in the week, the park will be more popular in the evenings when the waste transfer station is probably quieter. And weekends, you know, there will be some overlap. But again, the management plan will manage that in a responsible manner, and the council is involved in running this. So we have the certainty that they will be involved, and we'll have the social responsibility side of that to control and manage that, as well as the planning condition that requires the events management plan. In terms of lighting, we can't insist that they provide PVs to help generate electricity for the lighting, but that's something that I'm sure the applicant will take on board and consider if that becomes viable, or is financially viable for them. But it's not something that's before us at this stage, so we can't insist on that as part of the planning application, I'm afraid. And just to go back to one issue that Councillor Brown mentioned, yeah, doesn't involve motorcycles. It's for wheeled vehicles, so that could include wheelchairs, events, that sort of thing. But it's not for motorised vehicles. Yeah. So I didn't think I'd actually mention that. I think I mentioned control of motor vehicles accessing the site, motorbikes, but I didn't actually say it was for motor vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Phil. Also, I think people who in the locality that tend to use the amenity site, that they would sort of judge by what was the best appropriate time for them to use that. If there was an event going on, they would tend to sort of think I'd go another day. But Craig wishes to come back in there, and please, Councillor Higginson, could you turn your camera off?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was only just to ask colleague Mike Moran just to say what's been said in the chat for the members of people at home. If Mike, if that's okay.
Yeah, yes, certainly. Just to clarify, the circuit is for wheel sports only, no motorised vehicles whatsoever. The actual circuit will be fenced off to prevent access, unauthorised access, outside of the normal times of use, and the public footpaths that run through the site will be diverted around the outside of the fence, so there wouldn't be a possibility, or there shouldn't be a possibility, of any unauthorised motorcyclist using the circuit. And it is just a small point, but there is a separate footpath to the rear of the care home and the proposed care village, and it's a line that's been waiting to be developed for some years, since the houses next to the site were developed. There is a shared footpath and cycleway path that will run into the Velo Park site at the rear of the care home, so a proportion of users will not be using who don't use motor vehicles to access the site, won't be actually using the waste transfer the waste transfer station road to access the site, they'll be accessing it via that shared footpath and cycle path.
Oh, thank you for that explanation. Thank you, Mike. I think we've debated this and given it a really good airing, unless there's Councillor Giles Howard wishes to sum up any comments that he would like to have clarification on before we go to the vote.
Thanks very much, Chair. I don't want to prolong it. It has been a good debate, but I just note that nobody addressed the concerns about the highway, the traffic survey that I mentioned being atypical and done on a Sunday in the middle of lockdown.
Yes.
And I really wish that had been done a second time, because it might have brought about the need for some improvements to the site that could have been enacted then to make things better for the existing operations as well as those that are proposed. But no, thank members for their consideration. On this occasion, I really do want to see cycling provision in Abergavenny, because I've come across a lot of cyclists, local groups in the past myself, and I know there are residents who are dead keen to use this, but also residents who are extremely worried about what might end up on their doorstep. On this occasion, I'm going to sit on the fence and abstain. It's not something I'd normally do, because I can't wholeheartedly support it because of the highway issues that are unaddressed. So thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howard. And of course, we do have an Olympic medalist who comes from Abergavenny, and I know they feel a bit concerned that with the new school being built that they'd be only too glad to be able to use the availability of this site. I just had the hand shown from Mark Jones, Mark Davis, sorry, if he wishes to comment, please.
That's correct, Chair. In response to local members' comments, I appreciate the concerns regarding when the surveys were done, and in hindsight, I think another survey could have been called for. But I must emphasise, when we responded to the application, we responded on the basis that this development, any traffic generated on a day-to-day basis outside any large event, would not be coincident with the peak hour traffic flows in the area, namely the AM and PM peak. Access to this facility will be outside those times. And similarly, what I would say regarding large events, yes, there will be an events management plan, but there's also an obligation on the event organisers to come to the council via the event safety advisory group, at which numerous stakeholders are in attendance, in particular the police and emergency services, and they agree an event management plan specific to a event. And as you said, Chair, a very valid point. Users of the transverse facilities, if the events are well advertised, I'm sure we'll stay clear of that area so as not to sort of inhibit their movements when trying to dispose of their recyclable materials. So all in all, I think the site can accommodate the development, and any large-scale developments can easily be accommodated due to the accessibility of this site in the context of Abergavenny. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that clarity on that very much, Mark. We do appreciate it, because obviously the traffic was the main issue for a lot of members. I believe Councillor Feakin, you moved for approval, and you had a seconder, I believe, as well, was Councillor Harris. So I would like to go with the recommendations as proposed in the report. So Councillor Feakin has said he wishes to move the approval. So could I have a vote, please?
Look, Chair, I'll have to abstain on this. I missed most of this debate. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for that clarity, Councillor Eason. You're well aware of the regulations that if you're not there to take part in the whole debate of the application, you will not be able to vote. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chairman.
Sorry, who's that speaking?
That's Councillor Higgins and Jim Higgins. Now, the same applies to me. I'm abstaining on this one.
Right, thank you very much, both. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Just to introduce myself, I'm Denzel, the Assistant for the Planning Committee. We've now had 15 responses, 3 abstentions and 12 approvals, so I'm happy to state that that motion has been passed.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Denzel. So we can now move on to the next application of today. And this is 2020 and then 01495, and this is in Tinton. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. It's me again. I'll just share my screen. So, yeah, this is application for a 4-bedroom dwelling on land adjacent to the Royal George Hotel. It's the site, as we'll see from photo. I'll show the photographs first. It's probably easier, isn't it? So the site's a hard surfaced area of land between 3 recently constructed terraced dwellings and the Royal George Hotel and Guest Accommodation block at Tynton. The rear of the site, which is part of the hotel garden, which is beyond that car. See if we can see, that's the general area. The road up towards the Angiddy Wireworks car park. That's Crown Lodge, which is a listed building opposite. That's one of the accommodation blocks. Let's look at the site. That's the side of the site. And then that's down towards the end of the site, looking back towards one of the accommodation blocks in the garden for the hotel. And that's looking towards the frontage of the site and the new house, terrace house on the right. And it's looking back the other way, so the new houses are on the left-hand side of the picture. The site is beyond that close-boarded fence, and then there's Crown Lodge in the distance there. So if I go back to the plan. There we go. So they're proposed to build one house on the land that would measure approximately 8 meters by 12 meters and be 8 meters in height to the ridge. There would be a protruding gable to the rear, as you can see, resulting in the building being T-shaped. The floor plans of the gable would measure approximately 5 meters by 3.5 meters, and the new dwelling would have a roof of natural slate, and the walls would be finished in rough cast render with a brick plinth and detailing, and the windows would be white painted timber. And the footprint of the building would be at least 5 meters outside the designated flood zone. So, sorry, let's go and have a look at the elevations. There we go. The dwelling will be set back approximately 12.5 meters from the road, and to the front of the house there would be a gravel driveway to provide for off-road parking for at least 4 vehicles, and there would be a render wall to the front of the driveway, and this would contain 1.2 meter high timber gates set back off the road to allow somebody to stand off the road before entering. The hedge between the site and the shallows would be reduced in height, and a new timber fence would be erected between the site and the existing beer garden. So that would be that fence there. So this is shrubs and trees in this area, and it's a much lower level because obviously you have the stream here, and this site is raised up, this part of the site, compared to the lower parts where the garden would be. Tynton's been identified in the LDP as a minor village where small-scale residential development will be allowed. Policy H3 states that in minor villages, planning permission will be granted for minor infill of no more than 1 or 2 dwellings, resulting for the filling of a small gap between existing dwellings, provided that there's no unacceptable adverse impact on the village form and character or the surrounding landscape. And in this case, the plot is of sufficient size to accommodate a dwelling and the associated parking and amenity space. And it does fill a gap between existing, not so much, well, I wouldn't say they're dwellings, but I think if we were going to be that pedantic, we wouldn't allow a lot of things in our villages. It's a chalet block associated with the hotel, but it reads as a domestic looking building of some scale, and between the new dwellings, which are over here where my cursor is, and that existing block and with houses opposite, I think we feel comfortable that this is a very much an infill plot and compliant with the SPG. So the application proposes a 2-storey 4-bedroom detached dwelling that's set well back from the road. Doesn't quite come out the way it's scanned, but those windows are detailed to be more like Georgian sort of sash timber windows. The rough cast render with a slate roof and a chimney. So Crown Lodge opposite is a listed building that's rough cast rendered as well. So we think this will fit into the street scene very well. That was a previous version of the scheme, and that was simplified, and the front gables that were removed in to actually provide a bit more of a link with other developments in the area which don't have these projecting gables. So that's an indication of the mass of the building and how it fits in alongside the newer dwellings there and the accommodation block. But you'll see that it's slightly lower than that end terrace there and will fit into the street scene comfortably with the huge backdrop of the bank and trees behind it. So we're happy that it preserves the setting of the conservation area and it respects the natural beauty of the AONB. So excuse me. Ecological protection measures will be put in place. I'll leave it on that for the moment, come back to the parking in a moment. The assessment includes that habitats within the site of intrinsically low ecological value and no meaningful potential for protected species to be present. However, it's bounded by watercourses on two sides which feed into the River Waisak, and the ecology construction method statement sets out the biodiversity protection zones and measures will be put in place to avoid impacts to the SAC that could result from disturbance or pollution of the bounding watercourses. The dwelling has been designed so as not to harm neighbouring dwellings, either by way of overlooking, overshadowing or being overbearing, and any windows on upper floors are to serve non-habitable rooms. These face towards the chalet block. There are no windows on the elevation facing the gable of the terrace property, the newer terrace property, and there are no windows on that property either, the newer property either that's been built. The parking standards for new dwellings requires 1 off-street parking space per bedroom, up to a maximum of 3, and obviously the plot itself meets that for the proposed dwelling. In this case, it's pertinent to look at the parking requirements for the Royal George site as a whole, given that the plot for the proposed dwelling was originally used as a car park or part of a car park for the hotel. When we were there yesterday, we counted up 29 parking spaces at the front of the hotel. The applicant has submitted a breakdown of the parking requirements for the whole site, and this has been updated in the light of the recent developments on the site. This requirement totals 34 spaces. The Highway Authority has been consulted and considered that this breakdown is reasonable and concurs with it. Based on this information, the hotel restaurant could comply with the parking standard, and it would not be feasible to offer an objection on the grounds due to the loss of parking. So if we have a look, that's a suggested layout that could be done. If you look originally, there was no tables and chairs in front of the Royal George, probably prior to lockdown, and there's 5 spaces across that frontage there. There was also a space where the cycle parking's been put in. There's no reason why those spaces couldn't be reopened up and cycle parking put elsewhere near the hotel, either near the garden, for instance, where there's plenty of scope to put it, or elsewhere. That's it, as it was during lockdown, with that area hived off for seating, but it could be opened up, and that would present plenty of parking in terms of meeting the 34 spaces needed for it. So if you add up all the spaces that are available within the hotel, that would equate to at least 34 spaces, which would be compliant with the parking guidelines. In terms of flooding, NRW are satisfied that the proposed dwelling is located outside of the tidal flood outlines. NRW concludes that the applicant has demonstrated that the risks and consequences of flooding can be managed to an acceptable level. The site is already made up of hard standing, so the proposal will not increase the rate of surface water flow, and the driveway is to be of gravel chippings, i.e. a porous material. And as a result of using a porous material for the driveway instead of the existing tarmac, the surface water flow rate may actually reduce. And there is a culvert on the opposite side of the road, which has been known in the past to become blocked and cause flooding of the site. But since the culvert has been cleared of debris, there has been no further flooding. So in summary, we'd recommend approval of the application, subject to a Section 106 to secure the off-site affordable housing contribution of 12,180. So we'd recommend approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Phil, and some of us were there yesterday, obviously looking at that site, proposed site. Councillor Webb, I believe you were with the local member. If you wish to comment now, and then you can have 2 minutes later on to sum up. Thank you, Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. I believe there are 2 people in the waiting room, are they, that also wish to comment? The person from the Community Council and a resident, is that correct?
Yes, but you comment first and then we'll take those.
I just wanted to make sure that they were on board. Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I'm sorry to keep calling up parking once again. It is a problem. It is a huge problem in Tintern. Nearby residents have commented and contacted me very often during the course of the consultations regarding this planning application, which I must thank Kate Young for bringing it to committee at long last. It's been a long time, and she's done a lot of work on this together with other officers. Although the report states and Phil confirms that there are sufficient spaces, I find it still very difficult to see this actually. The spaces outside the hotel are narrow, and could I have confirmation that the amount of accessible disabled spaces are available nearby the front door of the hotel, please? The application site was, as members appreciate that were on site yesterday, this site was originally for the motel units. When motels were in fashion, this was the site for the cars to accommodate the motel. The Monmouthshire parking standards policy, I don't know if other members have noted this, but it's about 20 years old now. Things have changed in the past 20 years, and perhaps at some time in the fairly near future we could review this policy, as it really isn't up to date to comply with present cars and the amount of cars that are coming into our villages and towns nowadays. Parking in Tintern is at a premium, particularly at weekends and holidays, and with really, unless you're actually there at that times in the year, you will not appreciate the amount of cars who very often park dangerously, and we have to get the police out to sort things out. I know it's not a planning issue, but it is a planning issue, if you understand me. Neighbours, nearby residents have to have huge inconvenience at these times when there's a lot of traffic in Tintern. Otherwise, I think all the points have been well clarified in the document that we have in front of us today, and I leave it to members to and thank you for coming out yesterday to the site, which was appreciated. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Webb. I believe we have an audio recording, Craig.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've got a statement to read out for Tintern Community Council, and then we have an audio recording from local residents, and then we have a right of reply from the applicant. So correct. The first part of the public speaking I will do is from a statement from Tintern Community Council, which has also been presented to members in late correspondence. Both Tintern Community Council and local residents have previously raised significant concerns regarding the impact of the proposed application in reducing the level of car parking provision at the Royal George Hotel, Wild Hare. Tintern Community Council's concerns on this issue remain and have not been satisfactorily addressed. First, it must be recognised that Tintern already suffers from substantial problems with parking capacity due to the large visitor tourist population regularly exceeding the available car parking provision in the village. On a regular basis, all car parking spaces in the village are full, and as a result, cars are parked on the public highways, verges and residential lanes, understandably causing public safety and traffic issues and local residential concerns. If the proposed development, which is the subject of this application, is allowed, this would result in a loss of approximately 12 car parking spaces at the rear of the hotel premises. In the context explained above, Tintern Community Council cannot support any proposal which would have the consequence of reducing the availability of car parking spaces in the village. Secondly, the figures which are being used in the current planning application and planning committee report require clarification, as they are inconsistent with the current reality on the ground at the site. Tintern Community Council notes that the planning committee report says there are currently 38 spaces at the front of the hotel premises, and the number required for the premises would be 34. Therefore, the requirement would be met. This is not correct. The car park to the front of the hotel is currently laid out and marked up for 28 parking spaces, 10 spaces less than the planning committee report refers to at the beginning of the current figure. Tintern Community Council does not understand where or how the planning committee report has obtained the figure of 38 spaces. As noted above, the current car park capacity at the rear of the hotel is approximately 12 spaces. When combined with the current 28 marked car parking spaces at the front of the hotel, that is current combined total of 40 spaces, front and rear. If the 12 spaces at the rear of the hotel are lost as a result of the proposed development, which is the subject of this planning application, that will result in the hotel having just 28 car parking spaces. This would be below the figure required, 34, referred to in the Planning Committee report. The figures given in the application planning committee report therefore do not correspond with the reality on site. Tintern Community Council requests further investigation and clarification on these numbers. Thirdly, if, as Tintern Community Council understands, the car parking provision which will be available if the proposed development does proceed is just 28 spaces, then Tintern Community Council submits that in addition to not meeting the requirement of 34 car parking spaces noted in the Planning Committee report, this appears to be substantially inadequate for the very popular and thriving business to accommodate the parking needs of A, its hotel guests, B, restaurant, bar, coffee shop guests, and C, its staff. Local residents have raised concerns with Tintern Community Council, and the current car parking provision at the front of the hotel is regularly full, therefore demonstrating that the retention of car parking provision at the rear of the hotel is of key importance. And that concludes the statement from Tintern Community Council Chair. I will now share the audio recording from a local resident. Please bear with me as I set up the technology. Can members see a black screen now?
Yes, yes, Craig.
I will just start playing the audio recording then, Madam Chair.
Afternoon, Chair and committee members. The following is a summary of the 4 key objections from my neighbours and myself. Firstly, due to the loss of the rear car park, there will be an increase in on-road parking, giving rise to increased congestion, access and safety issues. This is our main concern, and we refer committee members to the photos and videos we've submitted highlighting this. The Highways report assesses the parking space proposed for the new house to be sufficient. However, our issue is not whether the new house will have sufficient parking, but rather the 12 current spaces will no longer be available to the hotel. As the photos and videos show, Forge Road and Tintern are surprisingly busy. We worry that removal of the rear car park will further increase congestion and safety risks to locals and visitors. Secondly, removing the rear car park will reduce the parking available at the Royal George below mandated levels. Based on the application, the planning officer says 34 spaces are required. The applicant claims there are 38, and we disagree. I counted the spaces today as 26. Removing the tables in front of the coffee shop would generate another 4, a total of 30. Furthermore, we believe the application understates the square meterage. We're requesting all public areas, present and potential, be taken into account. Does it include the old function room, now called the Snug, all the bedrooms upstairs, the outdoor pizza area, coffee shop and the gardens, which are used extensively? With these included, the parking requirement would exceed 34. Both car parks are well used by their customers, and the Royal George have admitted publicly on Facebook that parking is an issue for them. Please could you confirm someone has physically and independently verified the calculation? Promises that no future events will be held and that a home close to the site would be beneficial are not relevant when applying council policies. Indeed, the Royal George was put up for sale in December 21 on RightBiz and is still on the market today, the 25th of February, advertised with multiple income streams with potential to create more, with the opportunity for weddings and events. And so we ask that this plot of land within the application be legally reinstated within the grounds of the Royal George site, as the spaces it provides are needed by the business and should not have been split off in the first place. Thirdly, the proposal goes against the LDP and is not in keeping with an AONB and conservation area. We don't consider the proposal to be a visual enhancement, even with the recent plan amendments. I'm sure visitors and villagers would rather look at a hill and trees than another building. It will have a negative impact on the amenity and privacy of Crown Lodge, a listed property opposite the site, and the Royal George itself. Heritage was only given a weak endorsement, saying the location of the development does not lend itself in terms of setting to the development per se. Removing the bright yellow barriers and the redundant camera pole erected by the applicants would enhance the appearance and allow use of all the parking spaces. We also think it would set a precedent, as the properties to the west are now being used to set the context and justify this infill. These are the 3 affordable houses built by Monmouthshire Housing a couple of years ago, which we did not object to, as we understood they were rural exception dwellings for local residents and therefore a one-off. Finally, the site is on a floodplain and has flooded in the past. Consultation document TAN 15 says public bodies need to think more about the long term to foresee and prevent future problems. The weather is getting wetter and warmer, leading to significant increases in water levels. Given the last few years and weeks, we don't think relying on once in a 100-year flood events and saying it is unlikely for the flood levels to rise more than 4 metres to be prudent statements. In conclusion, we recognise the balance between business needs and the villagers is a delicate one, but this is not in the interest of the village of Tintern. We know the committee will think carefully before reaching their decision, but we're requesting you take a long-term view. Once the rear car park is gone, it cannot be reinstated. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that detailed discussion that you felt so strongly about. We do appreciate you putting that in for our committee today to consider. Thank you, Craig. Do you wish to comment now?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to say, to clarify, I don't think the local residents announced their name. It's Paula Gibson, who is the local resident from the area. There's one last piece of public speaking, Chair, which is
yes,
the applicant's response. So if I can just bear with me while I get the technology working. Can members see the applicant's representative?
yes.
Brilliant. I'll just press play of the recording then. Thanks, Madam Chair. Apologies. I'll just try it again.
Thank you, Chair and members, for the opportunity to address you this afternoon. My name is Stefan Harris of LRM Planning, and I am the planning agent acting on behalf of the applicant. The proposal before you is for a single dwelling in a location that is well related to the village of Tintern. The site is located amongst existing residential uses and alongside the former Royal George Hotel, which is now known as the Wild Hare. The applicant is the proprietor of the Wild Hare, who has successfully run the hotel for 4 years since acquiring the premises in early 2018. The Royal George, as it was then known, was failing at the time of the applicant's purchase and has since been turned around into a thriving local business, employing up to 40 people during peak times. The proposal is for a new family home for the applicant adjacent to their place of work, promoting local businesses and sustainable travel. As a small village and a popular tourist destination with historical significance, supporting local business within Tintern should be an important consideration. The principle of the proposed dwelling is established by virtue of the site being in a central location within the village and alongside existing complementary land uses. This proposed development would be classed as a minor infilling between existing residential uses, thereby complying with LDP policy H3. In design terms, though there is no prevailing consistency of vernacular in the site vicinity, there is traditional form that this proposal has sought to complement. In this regard, the dwelling as proposed has been amended since the submission of the original application in consultation with heritage officers at the authority. The heritage officers now conclude that the proposal is in keeping with the local vernacular as a result of the iterative amendments to the plans. The site is within Tintern Conservation Area. By way of its siting between existing buildings, the local topography and the dwelling setting along the valley of the River Anghyddi with limited panoramic views or vistas, the proposed dwelling will not adversely impact upon the setting of the conservation area. This position is supported by the heritage team, who have offered no objection. The dwelling and the access are both outside of the defined flood zone, with only the rear of the site in zone C2. The application has been accompanied by a flood consequences assessment, which has resulted in no objection from Natural Resources Wales. Supposed historic flooding of the site is based on empirical evidence of a blocked culvert, though this has not been known to have caused flooding during the application's ownership of the site. There have been objections to the loss of the existing car park that makes up the application site in its guise as an overflow car park for the wild hare. However, through review of the capacity of the main car park of the hotel and the county's car parking standards, it is clear that there is sufficient existing car parking, meaning that there can be no sustainable highways objection on the basis of loss of parking. The highways officer has reached the same conclusion, who also accepts that the proposal offers no concern from a highways safety perspective, resulting in no objection to the proposals. The plot is within walking distance of all local facilities, and perhaps most importantly, the applicant is within a short walking distance of their place of work at the Wild Hare. I'd like to add before concluding that I acted as planning agent to Monmouthshire Housing Association on the site immediately west of this for 3 new dwellings, which was granted in 2017. That application was approved in the face of similar constraints and objections, and based on the site location, the applicant before you is better related to the village than the previous application was. To conclude, the principle of residential development on this site is plainly acceptable. The design of the house has been modified in conjunction with the Heritage Officer in order to arrive at a suitably complementary dwelling given its context. All relevant technical issues have been addressed and the proposal accords with local and national planning policy. On behalf of the applicant, we therefore respectfully encourage members to follow the reference's recommendation and grant approval for this development. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much indeed. That was Mr. Harris. Thank you. Craig, do you wish to come back?
No, I don't think there's anything to cover off. I think most of the points regards to the principle of development, the flooding and the car parking was in Phil's presentation and within the report. If there's any further queries from members, happy to take them.
Thank you. I'll take comments now, I think, from most of the committee, or some of them were there yesterday. And then I ask Councillor Webb at the end if she wishes to use 2 minutes to sum up. So welcome comments now from the committee, please. Councillor Phil Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got no problem with the house, but I am still worried about the parking, although I've heard everything that's been said. Clearly, there's provision for 4 spaces in front of the dwelling. That's 4 cars that I would imagine are there currently. So that should take 4 places away from the issue. But if you think back to that slide showing all of the tables in front of the hotel, when we were there yesterday, most of those tables were occupied, even in the winter. And I would be reluctant if I was the proprietor of that establishment to take those tables away. They look attractive. They're very useful additional covers. So I would be concerned that they wouldn't actually be taken away. So I wonder whether there's going to be any potential for utilising part of the garden at the bottom of the current car park to extend it to make up for the loss of parking. Because I think Councillor Webb's absolutely right. We all know of the parking pressures in Tintern. And I think if we could get some sort of mitigation measures there is room, as far as I can see, on the back of that site, beyond that white marquee arrangement they've got there, possibly to provide for the car parking spaces that would be lost. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Well, I was thinking maybe some of those tables could have been taken across to the lawn area, and the area that they're sat on at the moment could have been used for disabled parking right at the front. Very accessible then for disabled parking. But there is scope, I think, perhaps some of the concerns to be addressed with the land at the back there, where by that marquee, as we all understand, is there. So
if I could just come back there very briefly.
Yes,
I understand that, but to my mind, that looked very attractive there, very welcoming. And from a tourist point of view, I think it would be encouraging people to stop. So as I say, from a trading point of view, if I was the proprietor, I would be reluctant to take those spaces away. But I don't know whether it would have to be conditioned, I suppose.
Yes, indeed, and perhaps the lower area, as you say, the lawned area adjacent to the car park, flooding wouldn't be such an issue if it can be utilised to extend the car park, but that isn't what's in front of us at the moment today, unless there's any dialogue with the applicant. Anybody else wish now to comment, please? I've got Craig back on screen. Oh, sorry, Craig, I've got Councillor Brown first, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I think bearing in mind the comments that have been made about parking and the potential for the site to actually accommodate further parking, and I'm not clear from both the reports and the presentations that there does seem to be a bit of a dispute about how many parking places there actually are, because I think in the report it said 38, and then basically I think you said when you counted on site there were 29, and then I think the community council said there were 28, and I think because parking is so important in the area, then I think that really I would suggest that the committee considers deferring this application to see if the applicant is willing to put in amended plans so that the parking spaces can actually be marked out on the plan as a condition of the planning application, and possibly suggestions of areas where the car park could be extended, could be further explored. So that's what I'm suggesting in terms of this bless you in terms of this application as a way of trying to solve the local concerns at the same time, because as you say, that's not what is before us, and then unless we actually have those places marked out on a plan, then it's not part of the planning condition as to how many spaces we've actually got. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think it's parking is the whole concern about this application, that perhaps we do need more dialogue with the applicant to be quite certain as to what we would be minded to approve. Anybody else wish now to comment, please? Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, those of us on the site visit yesterday did discuss this problem of parking, and we're talking about deferment to make absolutely certain that the number of parking spaces for the hotel and that have been taken away if this new house is built did comply with our parking standards. So I agree with Councillor Brown that a deferment to get this sorted between the officers and the applicant to the satisfaction of the committee would be a good thing. And I'm thinking positively here. I'm sure it can be accommodated, as Councillor Murphy has said. There is a possibility there. So I would, if Councillor Brown is moving deferment, I'd be very happy to second that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. There is scope, as we all noticed yesterday on the site visit. That's why it was so valuable to go on a site visit and see exactly what is there, the possibilities, and also how it affects other things in the area. So I call now next upon Councillor Davis, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Can I ask the officers, please, just to confirm that as far as they are concerned, there is adequate parking there, and that an exercise has been carried out to ensure that it complies with the planning regulations, because we seem to be debating whether there's enough parking spaces there, and the officers have already told us that there are enough parking spaces there. And if there are enough parking spaces there, then I would vote against deferment, because it wouldn't make any sense, Madam Chair, would it?
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Welcome for your comment. Councillor Howard, please.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. Just to clarify the status of the car park, I'm assuming that it's only for the use of customers and guests at the
establishment
premises. Yeah, because I know there's a parking sign on the junction of Forge Road and the A466, but I know that relates to the Wireworks car park a little bit further up. So I mean, there is an alternative parking there, although I appreciate that the footpath is substandard that leads it back down towards the village then, but it'd just be helpful to have the clarification about the number of spaces, because I'm not clear about it either. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Councillor Jeremy Becker, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was just really to reiterate what Councillor Davies asked for. If the officers can just confirm they've done that today, they've confirmed there are enough spaces, I think I'd be in agreement with him. We would be deferring for no real reason, really. So, yeah, if they could just confirm that for us.
Thank you very much, Councillor Becker. I'll hand that back then to you, Craig, please, for comments on what their concerns are.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Phil, can you share the photograph of the site again, please, for members? And I just want to clarify a few points with regards to the parking at the back. So the parking at the back of the property, which is the subject of this planning application, it is private parking. It's not open to the public. It's not for public use, and I completely appreciate the concerns that local members have, and local ward member Councillor Webb has, with regards to when there are seasonal events. It's a tourist attraction. There is significant parking constraints within the area, but this is all private parking. It's not open to the general public. It is for the business to run, and they could close the parking at the back at their own request. It doesn't have to be open or be used. The minimum that business requires to be used is 34. Highways colleagues have reviewed this development, and sorry, Mark Davis is just correcting me, 32 is the minimum that's required for this site, for that business to be operated. The information before you on the photograph shows the number of spaces on the site. There was some concerns there with regards to the benches at the front of the parking, which could result in some additional parking spaces. So on balance, the highways have reviewed it, planning officers reviewed it. There's no reason to sustain an objection for this proposed dwelling based on the loss of car parking for this business. So in terms of our assessments and reviewing that with highways colleagues, there is a sufficient parking for that business to run and for the proposed dwelling as well. And I do appreciate the concerns with regards to parking during peak tourist seasons, but however, this is all private parking for the maintenance of that existing commercial venture. So yes, that is the recommendation from officers, and it's obviously for members now to consider whether they feel it's enough to sustain an objection or not. But officers' recommendation is to approve based on the information that has been submitted to date.
I suppose, Craig, if I could come in there, and if this was a person or the applicant completely not connected to the wild hare, it would be an issue that would be in this whole context of that plot of land where they wish to build, and having nothing at all whatsoever to do with the Royal George.
If that plot of land was sold and used for whatever other use, it wouldn't result in that we can condition that parking is maintained at the top of the rear. It could be sold off for any alternative use.
Exactly. So it isn't, as you say, a public car park. It's been used as an overspill, so to speak, but it really is quite at the discretion of the owners at the moment. But they need not make that available for parking, whether there's a house on it or not anyway. Correct?
Correct. And there are public car parks within the vicinity of this site, and I appreciate that it's peak use of tourism. They might be full, but there are public places, car parking spaces, car parks in the area. This is private for the use of the wild hare only.
Thank you for that, Craig. And also, I would have like to have seen at least 3 parking spaces for disabled parking close to the entrance there somewhere. I don't know if there was only 1 there yesterday, but I don't think that is adequate today, as far more people rely on cars, and cars are construction these days for people to be independently driving, even if they are disabled. But I will ask now Councillor Webb if she likes to comment any further before I go to any vote.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Interesting debate. Just a couple of points I'd like answered, please. Where are the accessible disabled parking spaces, please? I mean accessible so that you've got a room to open your car door and to give the disabled person plenty of room to get in and out. The parking standards policy, can we look at this again? As I did mention that it is, am I right? It's 20 years old now, and things have moved on since that policy was adopted. And the initial use of this space was for the motel units. I think there's half a dozen motel units at the Royal George, and that was the original use for that space, please. So obviously change of use, whatever needs to be considered there. Thank you to the Community Council for their comments, and for the local resident who made some really strong points with regard to this situation, which is very worrying in Tintern, I must say. But I leave it to members now, and I would really support deferment to establish where these spaces actually are, and if they are the correct size for use as a car parking space. Thank you so much, members. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move defer, Chair.
Sorry, one thing, as Councillor Webb alluded to, that the motel or those chalet type buildings, if somebody is visiting and wishes to stay in those, should they then be using that top car park and not the one on the lower level at the main Wild Hare, because they would be taking up quite a few spaces there? Is there a condition that those that are staying in the motel should use that top car park?
No, it'd be a very old historic permission, Chair, and there wouldn't be any conditions tying them to that. I think the issue to remember is that the front car park's capable of accommodating at least 34 spaces, and that's what that exceeds the required use from what Mark Davis has said, of 32, right, regardless of this land for the chalet use. So and a lot of the traffic issues in Tintern don't stem from this hotel, they stem from all the other uses in the area.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So must remember that as well. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Right, thank you very much, Phil.
See the comments in the chat bar, Chairman, can you?
Sorry?
See the comments in the chat bar here.
Yes, as far as deferment goes. Councillor Webb?
Correct.
Right, you're moving as a local member for deferment. Do you have a second for it to be deferred?
Councillor Louise Brown has also, she's moved deferment, and that was seconded by Councillor Howard and also by Councillor Giles Howard, I believe. So there's a few seconds there.
That's fine, I only need 2, so I will, before I take any other vote, I will ask for a vote on the committee regarding deferment for the application on clarification of the parking. Is that clear to everybody now? Deferment for clarification on the parking. I would like a vote for that, please.
The only problem, Chair, is you've allowed this motion to be put forward and seconded long before we finish the debate. There's been a problem all along.
No, I did not go to it. They might have proposed that, but we've had a long debate since. Thank you, Councillor Eason.
Okay,
before
fine.
I've gone to the vote.
Okay.
Good afternoon again, Chair. We've now had 13 responses. There are 9 for deferral. Sorry, 14 responses now. There's 10 for deferral and 4 against deferral. So that motion is being approved.
So, through all
the effect being that I believe it will go back to the planning department and be deferred for a further meeting once that outstanding information has been compiled. Thank you.
Thank you. You're a bit crackly, Dan, so it's a job to really ascertain what you're saying. So, Craig, do you wish to clarify exactly now on the procedure now that we've taken that vote for deferral?
Yes, the application has been deferred for planning officers to review the car parking provision for the wild hare, and we'll report that back to planning committee at a future date. Right,
hopefully at the next committee meeting.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. You all clear on that now? Thank you very much indeed. So we now go to the last application of the afternoon, and I will also on the agenda to take the appeals. And could all members, while you're still on board, please stay online at the end of the meeting as I have something to say. Thank you very much indeed. I believe Andrew is on board now for 01416. This is again in Untitled Chapter. Thank you, Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, members. And just by way of introduction, my name is Andrew Jones, and I am Development Management Area Team Manager. I just asked my colleague Phil to bring up the presentation. Okay, so hopefully you can all see that on screen now. So members will be well familiar with this site. There was an application at our previous meeting. This is at Tinton Station, and this application is for planning permission for the installation of 2 shower and toilet blocks, of which you can see the positions there on screen. Just to confirm, the application is presented to Planning Committee this afternoon, as it's made by Monmouthshire County Council's Tourism and Leisure Department. So I'll just run through the slides for the benefit of any members that haven't been on site recently. So that shows on screen there the positioning of the 2 small units. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but that shows the timber-clad blocks, and I'll just confirm the measurements, because you probably can't see those. These would measure 3 meters by 2.9 meters and would have a flat roof with a height of 2.6 meters. And then turning to the next slide, this shows the position of the camping site just to the west there, that would these would primarily serve, and just to confirm, as per the officer's report, that was given permission in 1995 as a camping site, but hasn't been most recently used. I think it was last in sort of active use in 2018. And in terms of the photographs there, this shows well, one of the rail carriages was subject to application at last committee. The units would just go on the right, just sort of to the right there, but perhaps the other photographs now will show their position better. So you can see there, it's a pathway that leads up to the camping area. And these would go next to that the dark green container you can see on the right hand side. And that was shown on the layout plan previously. That's where they would both be sited in close proximity, grouped together. And you can see in a bit better context there, the relationship of where these would sit next to the green container in proximity to the sort of pedestrian linkway up to the camping fields. So that's just a sort of, again, a wider shot. So in terms of this application for the 2 units, as stated previously, this is in conjunction with the campsite that has an established use. The main planning considerations for us to consider this afternoon relate to their visual impact, impact on ecology, and third-party amenity. Having regard to planning policy, both PPW and the adopted LDP take a supportive stance for developments that promote sustainable tourism. And officers do recognise the importance of tourism to Monmouthshire's economy, and that the need is there to safeguard and enhance the county's visitor facilities. And this is particularly highlighted in Strategic Policy S11, that sets out the development proposals that will provide and or enhance sustainable forms of tourism will be permitted subject to detailed planning considerations. And then, therefore, in regard to those detailed considerations, firstly, in terms of visual impact, it is acknowledged that this is a sensitive site. It's within the grounds of the Grade 2 listed station, as well as the Grade 2 listed signal box, and the site itself sits within the wider Wye Valley area of outstanding natural beauty. Therefore, it is a sensitive site. But officers are satisfied that these proposals are of a very modest scale and are sensitively located within the site. You'll have seen in the report and correspondence that no objections have been received from the Council's Heritage Officer, who does not consider that these would harm the setting of the heritage assets. And furthermore, we would seek to control samples of external materials via planning condition to seek that they are appropriate to this setting. So on balance, officers are satisfied that given the scale of development, the discrete location, its setting within a backdrop of mature vegetation, that it would satisfy the sort of requirements to preserve the character of the wider AONB. With regards to ecology and biodiversity considerations, a survey has been carried out in support of the application. This included external and internal inspections of carriages. This was done in May 2021 and has found no evidence for the presence of bats. And whilst no objection has been offered by either MCC's in-house ecologists or NRW, obviously the issue of lighting is something that needs to be carefully managed. So accordingly, a condition is recommended that would remove normal permitted development rights in respect of lighting. Any lighting would need to be low-level PIR lighting, and details of type, positioning and specification would need to be previously approved by the local planning authority. We have received letters of support for the application. However, there have been some third-party concerns raised, and these are set out in full in the officer's report, which you will have seen and read. But just to highlight some of the key points made, these primarily relate to the impact on the historic character of the site, impact on residential amenity, the loss of parking, and also it's been observed and commented that the proposal will be contrary to covenants and other restrictions on the land. As I stated previously, given the scale of the development, officers don't consider it to have an unacceptable visual harm and would not cause harm to either the listed buildings or the wider AONB. In terms of third-party amenity, the nearest dwelling is approximately 80 metres away, and given the nature of the proposal, it's not considered that this, which would function in conjunction with an existing tourism site, would exacerbate any issues of noise or disturbance for third parties. To confirm, no parking provisional spaces would be lost. And finally, matters subject to covenants and other sort of restrictions are not material planning considerations. Therefore, in conclusion, this, as has been the previous application on the site, being carefully considered by officers and consultees and subject to the conditions set out as they are in the officer's report, is presented to you this afternoon, members, with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. I will call upon. Sorry, I'm getting my tongue twisted today. Could I please have Councillor Anne Webb, please, comment first of all as a local member again.
Yes, thank you. What can I say? We're so happy that the area is going to be improved and become more welcoming and have more facilities there. Amazing development there. Thank you for the work that the planning officer's done again, and to Mike as well. Just my only concern is that the local resident is kept fully informed, but I know that's not a planning issue. I would move approval of this application. I would have pleasure in moving approval of this application. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Webb. I believe on site yesterday that there were 2 of those cabins there. Am I correct? I would hope that there will be no cabins there if we are minded to approve this application. So I welcome other comments now for other members of the committee. Councillor Phil Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to second this. I think it's going to be an ideal improvement to the facilities there. Talking about lighting, I know we can't do anything about it, but it's worth a go. That floodlight on the gable end of the old station building, if that could be replaced by something more suitable, that's just a plea to try and get rid of some of the light pollution there. But it isn't a reason for turning anything down, so I'm happy to second the approval.
Can I just say something, Chair? Sorry, I should have mentioned this. With regard to what Phil has done, Councillor Murphy has just said, I mean, I think probably an old station light would be wonderful in that location on the platform, but probably that's something to consider and probably maybe too expensive to look at, but it's just an idea. Thank you.
It's a good idea too, Anne.
Yeah, considering it's a listed building, the thing is, I expect it was simply put up there as a security light because it seems to be one of those sensor lights that comes on and off, whether there's a bird or anything else that moves in front of it, or a cat or a fox or whatever in that locality. Anybody else now wish to comment, please? No one at all? Right, as there are no more comments, I will take it that Councillor Anne Webb has moved approval and seconded then by Councillor Murphy. So now I can go to the vote, please, for the recommendation of approval. No vote yet on the screen. Thank you. I have nothing on my screen.
It is there.
It's coming.
So we've now had 13 responses, all for approval, so that motion has quite clearly passed.
Thank you very much indeed. We go now to the number 5 on the agenda for the plan. Are you taking those, Phil? But before we can do those, Andrew, Denzel has reminded me that we had to defer the signing of the minutes for January. So I would appreciate Denzel now giving some clarity on that decision.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I moved myself closer to the internet, so I hope that I'm clearer now.
Yes,
apologies if I'm not. There's not much more I can do. Yes, in the previous meeting, Councillor Brown and Councillor Eason, I believe, queried the minutes of the January meeting, as they believe that that their motion was incorrectly set out. I've rewatched the video and of the meeting, and for reference, if anyone likes it, 2 hours and 6 minutes. I quite clearly state what the motion will be. It will be a vote on approval with the new condition, and then if that fails, a second motion on approval without that condition. So I believe Councillor Brown and then Councillor Eason had requested that an additional condition be added, and the way that that motion was phrased was that it would be a vote for approval with the new condition, and then if that failed, it would be a second motion on approval without that condition. The effect in either event would have been identical if we just voted to add that condition and then voted for approval. It would have still failed. Members could have still voted against that, and then we'd have had to revert for the motion as for the original recommendation in any event. If that I hope that that's clear then. That there's no material difference to how the motion was presented, but the wording was quite clearly that it was a vote for approval with the new condition and then a vote. And then if that failed as it did, then a second motion on approval without that condition. So I'm happy to state that the minutes as presented were correct in that regard. So we can now move to a vote if everyone's happy on that, to approve the minutes of the January meeting that were deferred from the February meeting. I'm happy to take any questions on that as well if needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denzel. Councillor Brown or Councillor Eason, do you wish to say anything at all on what Denzel has just reported?
Yeah,
No,
I think.
Go on, Lee.
Sorry, yeah, I think obviously it has it because it's been checked, you know, that must be correct. I think I'll have to be careful in future just to say I'm voting on a particular condition, because I think sometimes, you know, you think, well, that might affect your actual final vote on approval. So I think I'll have to be careful to make sure, because that's what I thought I was doing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. As I said, it wouldn't. I don't think that it would have materially affected the outcome in any event, because if members would have been asked to vote purely on your condition, if that hadn't been added, then there would have still been a vote. If it had been added, then it would have passed in the same way as the motion that we presented. If it hadn't been added, then it would have failed in the same way as the motion we presented. So I don't think it's materially affected the outcome or the vote. But yes, definitely feel free to query what exactly motion we're putting forward if you're not sure about that. Excellent.
Yeah, I think the query was made at that meeting, and I believe you adequately answered it, although it was a bit to and fro really on what the actual outcome is going to be. We're looking for a condition to have COVID put up to try and keep the noise down, and it did get a bit lost in translation, quite honestly. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Do we now, Denzel, need somebody to move those minutes now and to second them?
Well,
yes, so yes. So those minutes need to be yes.
It'll have to come from me and Louise, won't it?
Yes, preferably.
I'll propose it.
Right, it's proposed for those minutes of the January meeting. They are being put now for approval and seconded by Tony Eason, correct?
Yep.
Is that all right with you, Councillor Brown?
That's fine, thank you, Chair.
Okay, right. Thank you. Yeah.
And can I go to the vote for all the rest of the committee to be in agreement with that, please?
Happy to move that, Chair.
Everyone on board? Anybody speak up if they're not?
Approved, Chair.
All okay with you now, Denzel? Yes, we've had, there's a poll in the chat bar. We've had 11 responses, all in favour, so it's quite clearly up there.
Right, thank you. I will sign those when hopefully on Thursday when I go into County Hall. We now go to item 5 on the agenda, and this is now for the appeals decision, please, Andrew.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. We'll just get the slides up for reference as well on these. So there's 2 appeals this month to report back to you. So the first of which, this is Greenfields in Llanfoes. This is the site of the sort of junction of Gypsy Lane and Merthyr Road. It was for the demolition of the existing dwelling and its replacement with 18 retirement apartments and other associated works. So this was one that was determined via planning committee back in late 2020. It was one that was put forward for officers with a recommendation for approval, apologies, but was ultimately refused by committee, and that reason centred on one single reason, but sort of three prongs to it, in terms of the concern of the impact on the street scene and its scale relating to its setting. It's harmful to the impact and privacy of neighbours, and also being restrictive to longer views of the Blaenavon World Heritage Site. So that was the reason for refusal, and the inspector has dismissed the appeal. The inspector rather considered there to be 3 key issues to that decision. That was the impact on the surrounding area and certainly the World Heritage Site, the impact on neighbours, and the impact on the River Wye Special Area of Conservation, or the SAC, and associated consideration of phosphates issues. It was worth noting at the time of when it was considered by planning committee, obviously the sort of current guidance on phosphates wasn't in effect, but obviously the inspector has to make a decision based on requirements and policy position at that time. So the inspector actually found on the first 2 of those 3 issues that they would not be significant harm, i.e. to impact on the surrounding area or to the World Heritage Site or to neighbours. But as part of the Habitats Regulations assessment process and following appropriate assessment, the inspector concluded that the development would have a significant adverse effect on the SAC, and the appeal was dismissed on that basis. Linked to this appeal was also an application for costs, which was successful in part only. Just to sort of quickly run through that for you. The main issues of this set of the cost application centred on really the three elements of the council's reason for refusal, and the inspector found that in the first part, that being the consideration of the character in the area and its setting, that the council had adequately addressed this, and that these were matters of an exercise of judgment, and there was no sort of failings found there. However, in regards to the other points to that, the inspector considered that the council had done little to support this part of the refusal, and that conditions proposed in the officer's report would have been sufficient to address these impacts. And then finally, with regard to the third element, the inspector found that the council, in their findings, was the council acted unreasonably through refusing permission on a ground that it had failed to evidence adequately. That's relating to the views towards the Blaenavon World Heritage Site. So there was an award of partial cost. So that is in the process of going through its procedural elements now, with details sort of to be agreed. The second appeal we've had this month was also dismissed. This is Manor Garage in Roggett. So this was for the change of use of land to become an industrial use, and the application also included an extension to an existing building, 2 new industrial units, and provision of 7 parking spaces. So that's the site there. Triangular parcel of land. The site was outside of the development boundary, as you can see on that slide, and crucially, it's also within the green wedge, and the inspector found that the provision of buildings, in particular, incurring into the green wedge, would prejudice its open character, and that the units themselves were speculative with no end user, and in the absence of any exceptional circumstances to justify development in the green wedge, it was considered unacceptable, and the inspector dismissed the appeal. So those are the 2 appeal decisions for you this month. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. That concludes our agenda of today. If Wendy's on board, if we could stop recording, and I will ask members to please be still online. Thank you all very much for your attendance. Sorry, Mr. Brown.
Chairman, yeah, sorry to interrupt. I just wondered, have I missed it, or did we go through the minutes for February as well?
Yes, I believe we did.
Oh,
yes, because there was no comment of accuracy.
Right, okay, then that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we did. Thank you very much indeed. So if let me know, Wendy, when we finish recording, and then I will speak to the committee. Thank you.